We always talk about transportation and how it's evolved across the Appalachian Mountain Range here on Redoubt Productions. Sometimes we talk about trains. Everybody loves when we talk about trains on Redoubt Productions. But before there were trains navigating these mountains, there was a canal system. In fact, there were multiple canal systems across the eastern seaboard that was really the first effort by the United States of America to expand its reach from the East Coast to the west of those Appalachian mountain ranges. And we've talked a few times before about one of the most prominent canal systems, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, just simply the C&O Canal. And today we're going to explore some of the infrastructure that is preserved by the National Park Service in the community of Williamsport, Maryland. Now, as a recap on the history of the C&O Canal, it was initially devised by some of our founding fathers, including George Washington, who wanted to establish a canal system connecting the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., to the west. And really the gateway to the west in the late 18th century was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because of the Ohio River. If you connect those two key locations, you could send commerce all the way from the East Coast, all the way down the Ohio River Valley as far as the eye could see. There's a problem doing that. The Appalachian Mountains, more particularly if you're around Pennsylvania and Maryland area, the Allegheny Mountain Ranges, which is just our nice term for the Appalachians in our neck of the woods. Well, George Washington and the other founding fathers never really got to see their investments of a canal work in their lifetime, but future generations would solve the solutions of how would you move heavy boats by water uphill. And the answer was an intricate series of locks that would stretch all the way from Georgetown, just north of Washington, D.C., to Cumberland, Maryland. Unfortunately, they weren't really able to solve the issue of trying to continue from Cumberland to Pittsburgh, and the C&O Canal began construction in the 1820s, 1828, and by the time it was fully operational in the late 1850s, there was already the railroads, which were bypassing some of the needs the canal initially was required for. However, the one big advantage of the canal system in the United States, especially in the 19th century, when the railroads came online, they're in their infancy. They weren't able to carry the heavy loads we're accustomed to today. So bulk freight, such as coal, brick, cement later on, all these bulk freight stuff could not be really shipped in mass on railroads. They could be hauled on boats, however. So the C&O Canal especially tapped into that market of bulk freight, carrying it from the nation's capital up to the foot of the Allegheny Mountains at Cumberland, Maryland, and eventually the rest of the way when the railroads caught up to it, you could then haul things by rail from Cumberland, Maryland, over the mountains down to Pittsburgh via either the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad and also the Western Maryland. The manpower needed for this canal system would be beneficial to several towns along the C&O Canal. Williamsport, Maryland was no exception. The town was a relatively quiet ferry town before engineers placed milepost 99 of the Chesapeake and Ohio here. This is significant as it is near the midpoint of the entire route. Not all canal boats would be making the full 185-mile trip. Rather, they would need to do an about face and head home once depositing their load. But the canal channel was not wide enough to rotate the boats in the opposite direction. Turnaround basins were established at key points along the route, including at Williamsport. Acting as an inland wharf, these basins allowed for an exchange of commerce between the canal, roads, and eventually the railroad. At Williamsport, an old brick warehouse dating back to the late 18th century was upgraded to transfer coal between the canal boats and awaiting coal hoppers sometime after the American Civil War. In addition to coal, several other bulk goods could be purchased by local customers as what became known as the Cushwa Basin. Additional businesses built up to provide services to both passengers and crews on board the canal boats, making Williamsport a thriving center of commerce by the start of the 20th century. Now, one of the big obstacles a canal encounters is waterways, and not the man-made one they created, natural waterways. So what do you do if you have a natural waterway impeding the progress of your man-made waterway? Well, you bridge a natural waterway, of course. You build a bridge of water over a natural body of water, aka an aqueduct. And what we have here is the Conococheague Aqueduct. This will be established around the time of the canal's construction in the 1830s and 40s. And well, it has a quite unique history. You'll notice the left side, we have some nice stone underneath our feet, but the right side, well, it's wood. And that is because in 1920, a canal boat accidentally failed to navigate this aqueduct properly and smashed right through the side of the stone. And by this point, the aqueduct, being almost a century old, spilled all of its contents out into the Conococheague below. And the C&O Canal, by this point, was pretty bare fin in terms of supplies, in terms of resources. They just decided, instead of replacing it with a new stone wall, they would just put some planking. And actually it worked, albeit there were some leaks, but it did work, as you can see here. Now, interestingly enough, I got to visit this site once when I was like 6 years old. First time I went to visit Antietam as well. And at that point, the National Park Service had not properly preserved the aqueduct. Well, they had stabilized it, but they hadn't restored it. So you could just look over on this side, and there was just nothing there. It was a little bit ominous, actually. It's like, oh, here's this bridge with nothing on, no siding. But it's pretty cool to see today that not only have they restored the damaged side of the aqueduct, they now have water flowing through it. It is now an operated aqueduct today in 2024. And to my knowledge, I think this is one of the few surviving aqueducts on the C&O Canal that still has water in it. Now, eventually, Couchois decided to start using rail service to take some of their coal out of Williamsport. The problem being the canal. So in the turn of the 20th century, they actually devised a lift bridge to raise the spur tracks above the clearance of the canal boats that were still navigating the C&O Canal in the early 20th century. And it still survives here in Williamsport. I don't think there's too many examples of a lift bridge like this left in the United States of America. This may be one of, if not the only surviving lift rail bridge relating to a canal system in the United States. Pretty awesome it's still in existence here. With this being the C&O Canal and being adjacent to the Potomac River, you can imagine that the water level, even though man has tried to maintain Mother Nature never wants to be held down, and Mother Nature will always fight back violently when man tries to hold her down. So that's a very fanciful way of saying it's flooded here a lot near the Couchois Basin in Williamsport. Right along the Couchois Basin building here, they actually got high water marks for some of the floods. So can't really read this one too well. I want to say it's Tuesday, April 20th, 1832, I want to say. And we up here we have November 25th, 1857. And this one looks more recent. Yeah, that's very recent. High water mark, April 27th, 1927. I'm sorry, I can't really read these out too well. I'm sure somebody in the chat saying, no, actually it says, it looks like an 8. So is this 1987 or 1937? Maybe, or 1930, yeah, maybe 1937. Well, anyways, I want to show over here. You may recognize that one. High water mark, May 31st, 1889, relating to the Johnstown flood. And then up here at the very top, maybe hard to see on the camera, that is for the 1936 flood, the St. Patrick's Day flood. The worst flood on record to happen basically in the Pittsburgh region. Now you may be saying, well, Spencer, you're quite a distance from Pittsburgh. This is technically the DC metro area. Well, it affected more than just the forks of the Ohio. It also greatly affected the Potomac River and a lot of people in the mid-Atlantic region. Oh, and I almost forgot, here's the high water mark for Hurricane Agnes, June 23rd, 1972. Oh, and just adjacent to the Couchois Basin, we got a series of Civil War trail signs, because that's right, there was activity relating to the American Civil War happening around the town of Williamsport. And you can pretty much figure out why. It's the canal, it's the C&O Canal. The Confederate want to disrupt the C&O Canal, which is bringing valuable goods and even equipment and troops to the Union war effort, bringing them from the west to the east. So they are constantly harassing and trying to chew up the infrastructure of the C&O Canal. And while the Union, they will try to have garrisons, not in large numbers as they're being pulled to fight the front lines, but they would still try to sustain some garrison of troops along the whole length of the C&O Canal to try to defend it from those raids. So there was a constant minor border action happening along the Potomac River, which is just over here on the south side of the C&O Canal. Constant border action between what was technically the Confederate state of Virginia over there until 1863, when that portion of Virginia joined the Union as West Virginia, and then the Union state of Maryland, even though it was still a slave state for 1864. Now, the most important action of the Civil War in Williamsport comes during the Gettysburg Campaign. Earlier in the campaign, elements of the Army of North Virginia, including Longstreet and A.P. Hill's corps, they're going to cross the Potomac River into Maryland around this region. I don't know exactly where, but basically in the Williamsport area. And well, after the Army of North Virginia was defeated at Gettysburg, they're going to begin to fall back here once more to Williamsport. The first people from the Confederate retreat will arrive here July 5th under the guard of John Imboden's cavalry. And this is just after the Battle of Monterey Pass, that harrowing night rainstorm action on top of South Mountain in the Monterey Pass. There weren't too many casualties, but man, was it a confusing battle. And we do have a short video of retracing history about it. Well, in any case, Imboden's going to bring the first of the Confederate wounded from Gettysburg and kind of put him in the houses of residents here in Williamsburg and instruct the civilians to start cooking for the wounded men. And as more of the Army of North Virginia start to gather here at Williamsport trying to cross the Potomac River, well, they got a problem. And immediately after the Battle of Gettysburg, there was an intense rainstorm over the region, and the Potomac River was swollen. It was too swollen and too swift moving for the Army of North Virginia to safely cross. So there's a period of time after the Battle of Gettysburg, the Army of North Virginia are trapped in Maryland. They start forming defenses around the borough of Williamsport, overturning wagons, grabbing anything they can from their own supplies, perhaps even from houses, such as all sorts of crates, and trying to form temporary defenses around Williamsport, around their encampment that's kind of clinging to the C&O Canal and the Potomac River. Now, there's a lot of controversy about how George Gordon Meade, the Union commander of the Army of Potomac, is going to react to this. He ain't going to get here until a few days after the Confederates start rolling into Williamsport. I want to say, and I could be wrong on this, around July 8th, July 9th is when the Army of the Potomac starts to surround Williamsport. And while there are some, I just want to say, demonstrations, some testing the waters, as you say, of the Army of North Virginia, Meade does not make a general offensive. He argues that his army is too worn out and that really the Confederates have only one choice but to surrender anyways. And at the end of the day, his main goal is to ensure the Confederates are not threatening Washington, D.C. and the states of Pennsylvania and Maryland. And if he could do that with any more blood loss, he'll be more than happy to do it. So eventually, by July 14th, the Potomac River has settled down enough that Robert E. Lee can begin negotiating the Potomac River, pulling his army in ferry boats, and eventually, I'm not sure, I think he eventually does get a pontoon bridge, and eventually stretches it across the Potomac River and pulls his army peacefully out of Maryland and back to what was now West Virginia, thus officially ending the Gettysburg Campaign. The Gettysburg Campaign, the most famous military operation in the American Civil War, terminates here at Williamsport. Although the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal would be abandoned after severe storms in 1924 destroyed some of its infrastructure, it would find a new lease on life in the late 20th century, and that was as a biking trail. And today, the C&O Canal makes up one half of one of the most popular biking passages in the United States, at least on the eastern seaboard. The first half being the C&O Canal, and the second half being the Great Allegheny Passage. So the first half, you get to retrace the canal age of the United States of America from the nation's capital to Cumberland, Maryland. And then you get to retrace what replaced the canals, the railroad, from Cumberland up over the mountains into Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. While we won't be riding them today, I want to point out that the National Park Service does now offer boat rides of the immediate Cushwan Basin, including a trip over the aqueduct just immediately to the left of the camera. All right, so just a brief stop for me to rest my legs before I head back on the road, heading it home. I just got done making another episode of Retracing History, but figured it's been a while since I've explored the Cushwan Basin. I think I was like 6 years old last time I was here. The aqueduct did not have water in it, so that was a pleasant surprise today. So thank you guys for tuning in to this edition of Retracing History, getting to explore some of the critical infrastructure of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, which is preserved here in Williamsport, Maryland. I just discovered from the staff members inside the visitor center here that the administrative offices for the Chesapeake and Ohio Bike Trail are now here in Williamsport. They were moved here from Hagerstown in 2019. So something else I learned today. Staff here is really friendly. They have a lot of hands-on stuff for children as well. So if you're traveling on I-70 across Maryland and need to get your kids out to stretch some legs, bring them down here to the Cushwan Basin in Williamsport, Maryland. A lot of stuff for the kids to do, a lot of natural environment to explore, take a hike around, stretch your legs, and then you're ready like me to get back in the car and head on the road. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button down below. And if this is the first time watching Retracing History from Readout Productions, well, welcome. Consider subscribing here to the channel so you'll be the first notified when new updates come out. I tend to upload weekly on Saturdays, and we try to also do live streams on Thursdays. And if you want to go the extra mile in support of me, we do have a Ko-fi page. The link is in the description below. For a small fee, you can assist me in being caffeinated every morning to get me my coffee. And if you want to go the extra mile, you want to sustain this channel, consider joining our membership program, The Garrison. We'll get some bonuses that include digital monthly postcards, essentially behind the scenes photographs of our visits. You're going to get access to select scripts for some of our more intensive videos we create here. And just a new thing I'm starting, whenever I go on one of these trips, our Garrison members will have access to hotel reviews. So thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.